Welcome to the Journey Podcast, the podcast that's all about you. The podcast that interviews interesting guests and listens to their journeys of where they've been, where they are now, and where they are going. And welcome to the Journey Podcast. Today, I'm excited to have with us Cory Rankin. Cory is the founder and has the Our Family Strong. Our Family Strong is a service for counseling entrepreneurs to have stronger marriages. And Cory can describe more about that because I'm sure that he's an expert on his subject better than I am. I've just had some opportunity here to get to know him, but Cory has been a part of helping author or co-author 6 individual books on these types of topics, and it's just really a pleasure to have Cory, you with us here today. How you doing?
Nate, I'm doing great. I appreciate that introduction. You mentioned counseling. I don't so much do counseling, but more coaching entrepreneurs. And if you think about a coach, what does a coach do? A coach helps you take your greatness and execute it in a way where you get more out of yourself. And that's exactly what my wife and I do. We help these entrepreneurs that have good relationships and get more out of their relationship by making sure that God's the first priority, that their family's the first priority. And we work with entrepreneurs, so we make sure that the family comes first and the business doesn't take over. And then also, yes, you did mention books, and we have books about just strengthening marriage. And my son, who's 7, published his book about feelings. So happy to be here, Nate.
A 7-year-old author in your house.
Yep. He actually published his first book before I did.
That's a little competition between dad and son there, huh?
That's exactly what it was, because we were starting to put our first marriage book together. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to write a book for you." We're like, "No, you're not." But as parents, you can't say that. And so he actually started, and it started as a bedtime story, and he started developing it into a true story. And we helped him draw the pictures and color it and publish it. And it's been quite an amazing journey to see him, because we adopted my son to foster care. And the way he came into care was he was actually abandoned at Walmart. His mother was shoplifting, and when the security tried to stop her, she left, and he was in the car at 7 months old.
Wow.
And so he's got a lot of attachment issues. He's got a lot of lack of trust that adults have failed him through the foster care system and stuff. And so to see the confidence that becoming a published author has given him, and the belief in himself, has just been life-changing. And so we can just go there that as a parent, our kids might have crazy ideas, and we might be a roadblock that stops them from chasing their dreams. And so we nearly said, "Nah, you're not going to write a book." But we're like, well, if he wants to go for it, then let's go for it. And it's been quite an amazing thing to watch him, because the book is about feelings and about his emotions. And so the book was a way that he could learn to identify his emotions. And in the last 2 years since he's had his book, his self-confidence has increased so much.
Well, that's awesome. And for reference, that book is "Will You Be My Friend" by Jojo Rankin, correct?
Yeah, so Jojo's my wife.
Oh, okay.
My son.
Jojo and Kai Rankin, I'm looking at right here on Amazon. So I'm going to have to put that in my cart here and check it out. I have a 6-year-old, so something maybe for him to check out.
Yeah, do it. And put that in your cart, because any book that is sold on Amazon, he gets 100% of it. So
wow, that's awesome. So building an entrepreneurial dream right there at 7 years old. So
yeah.
So okay, so tell me a little bit, Cory, how did you come into this role? How did this come about?
Well, the shortest answer and the best answer is 100% divine intervention from God, because I graduated physical therapy school. My wife was a nurse. Neither of those have to deal specifically with relationships. But one day in 2017, my community had a major, major tragedy. And my wife was working at the local hospital that night. She got an impression from God that your mission in life is to save families. And that was confusing for us because we had been foster parents for 5 years at the time. I was in physical therapy school. She was a nurse. We're active in our church and in the community. We were doing everything that we knew how to do to strengthen families. So we just acted in faith, kept moving forward. And 2 years later, in 2019, we were attending a physical therapy conference in Florida. That was a business conference. And we got another impression that day that said, the time is now. So we joined the mastermind that was available, and that was the start of our entrepreneur journey. And we didn't know what to do. We didn't know the word entrepreneur. So we thought, because we had 30 children that we fostered over the years, maybe we'll do parenting stuff. And we started to explore that, and that just wasn't it. We weren't feeling called to that. So then we were more prayer, more direction, that we started working with married couples. And we were working with couples that were close to getting divorced. And that just was really draining, and we weren't feeling the passion there. So after a short while there, we started working with entrepreneurs. And that's where we really started to hit our stride. And we've now since moved away from entrepreneurs who are struggling in their marriage to entrepreneurs who are thriving in their marriage that the business has taken over. So we thought that saving families meant from divorce. Now we've learned 5 years later that it's not saving families from divorce, saving families from the business. Because entrepreneurs, they have such great intentions and they work so hard for time freedom, for financial freedom, for their family. But what happens is the business almost becomes a mistress. They get all the time, all the attention. The entrepreneur has to scale, has to grow, has to fulfill. And the family often gets the leftovers. And that's not the way God intended life to be. So what we do is we help these entrepreneurs really turn their focus back to God, back to their home, so they can show up for their family, for their wife, their spouse. And then as they're better in the home, they're better in the business. So that's kind of our short version of our journey. God had put his hand in it. And last year, I was still studying for my physical therapy exam and got another impression that my time was better spent serving families than saving these. So I walked away from 100% away from physical therapy, which was really, really required a lot of faith, because I invested 13 years of my life through undergrad, through high school, preparing to become a physical therapist.
Wow.
I accrued more debt than my mortgage in chasing this dream. I now have a doctorate degree that I don't use because the Lord called me a different way. So that required incredible amounts of faith for me. But I'm so glad that I did walk away from physical therapy, because the transformation that I've been able to have in the lives of some of my entrepreneur friends and colleagues has been life-changing.
Wow, that's quite a story. So maybe focus a little bit more on, a lot of people get married, but you're specifically targeting that entrepreneurial married person. Why would you say that is?
Another impression from the Lord, like I said, we were starting with all couples, and 3 months into that journey, one day my wife turns to me and says, we need to work with entrepreneurs. She's like, I don't want to work with entrepreneurs, because we didn't know enough about entrepreneurs to know that
They're pretty
that is
weird.
really, really, yeah, they 1% crazy. A lot of times people say is they have an entrepreneur brain. They don't, it's hard to shut it off. They're always looking to solve problems. They're always on the go. And so we have come to work with entrepreneurs because we have 5 kids, we have therapy, we have speech, we have sports, we have grad school and their school, and all these things that entrepreneurs have that can really take away from their family. And we've been able, the Lord's blessed us with these experiences that we can help families build strong, thriving marriages by avoiding the business and life taking away from the relationships.
Wow. So do you see a lot of like mental health issues with business owners and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, maybe not so much in the mental health as far as depression or anxiety, those kind of things, but also like just an intense need to have success, an
Mm,
intense need to be able to provide, to fulfill, to scale, to and so a lot of entrepreneurs they early in their business deal with imposter syndrome or feel like they're not good enough because they failed or this isn't working or the business isn't going fast enough. All these things. So there certainly is a lot of guilt. There's certainly a lot of frustration. There is if it's not managed, that's where you can see a lot of that depression or anxiety when entrepreneurs start to compare themselves to other people. Like for instance, if you have one entrepreneur that's in a coaching program and they see the other members of the program doing more, going faster, earning more than they are, they can also start to think, well, am I broken? Am I not good enough? Those kind of things. So that's more what we see versus the mental health that you might think of like anxiety, depression, those kind of things, more just beating up on themselves and those kind of things.
So are you seeing you're talking more on the spiritual side of things. Are you seeing more spiritual health being the healthier they get in that area, the more successful their business is?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of times what you see or what we see as an entrepreneur, they have very good intentions to start their business for their family, for freedom, just to serve, to have an impact. And they stop doing the things that they did when they first were dating, whether that's being really active in church, whether that's frequent time with their spouse and going on dates and just being really intentional. Those things start to fade. And so, as an entrepreneur, the connection with their spouse fades and their connection with God fades. They kind of get on their own little island. They feel stuck. And so that's a lot of what we do is we can restore God back into the marriage. Everybody wins. And so we do focus a lot because we work mostly with Christian entrepreneurs. We focus a lot on building a triangle that God is the top and he husband and wife are the bottom corners of the triangle. And as they come closer to God, they come closer to each other. And that's a pretty foundational principle that we teach that you don't have to do this alone. As an entrepreneur, you have a team, both in your coworkers, the people you serve, people in your business. You also have a team at home, your spouse, your children that can be a great support. But also, God's in control of our life. And when we allow him to control the business, help us with creating the things that will have the biggest impact and help us live in our purpose, that's when you see some really, really incredible things, both in the home, in the marriage, but also in the business accelerating.
So what would you say is a common myth about what you do? Probably one of them is I called you a counselor and you're a coach. What would is that one of the common myths? Are there others in what you do?
Yeah, probably the biggest myth that I see is, oh, what you're doing is so incredible for that couple over there because I'm good. I mean, they don't say that per se, but we do have a lot of interactions where we take these entrepreneurs and they're like, oh, my relationship is good. But in reality, they've settled for average, which really is heartbreaking because I don't know one single entrepreneur that is okay with being average. They want to be the best. But in being the best in the business, they've settled for being average in the home. And what I mean by that is a lot of entrepreneurs like, oh, I grind, grind, grind. This is just a season, and the season never ends. So the business gets all the attention and the family gets the leftovers. And so that's a myth that I see a lot of people are, oh, my marriage is good. I'm fine. I don't have any problems there, but their communication is lacking. The emotional connection with their spouse is faded. Their true bond with the children is faded. So although their relationship might be good, it could be great. So that's one thing that I see is a lot of people do not recognize the influence that the business is truly having in the home and on their relationships. They don't correlate those two things a lot of the time.
So how do you help an entrepreneur come over that myth or that challenge?
Put your family on the calendar first. As an entrepreneur, your calendar can fill up so fast. You say yes, yes, yes to all these opportunities. And the more opportunities you say yes to in the business, the more you're saying no to bonding or things that matter to your family. So the first thing that we do is really establish a family vision. We help these entrepreneurs get their family involved because most of the people that we work with is a one entrepreneur home. So they have a spouse who is not an entrepreneur, who may not understand the entrepreneur mindset, may not understand what it takes to be successful in the business. So we really help focus a family vision. So the family is involved. So it's not my business as the entrepreneur, but it's our business. And as we start to get the family involved and create family vision, now we can start to identify what the important priorities are. And we can make sure that those priorities go on the calendar first. Date night, kids' activities at school, church activities, sporting events. And if those go on the calendar first, and then you do everything else around that in the business, oh, it's quite a magical place to be because how many of you, maybe as an entrepreneur, your kids might say to their friends, oh, my dad works too much. He's never around. He misses all of my things. And when that happens, the spouse feels neglected. The children feel like they're missing their dad, their mom, whoever is the entrepreneur. They feel like there's just the business is more important than the family at times. It really should never come to that because the family should always be most important. The business, I don't know one single entrepreneur that started their business because, oh, they just want to make lots of money. They started their business so their family can be well taken care of, most people. And so if you forget about your family to get to the top of the business, you failed. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, they beat themselves up. Oh, I failed. This business opportunity didn't work, or this opportunity didn't work. The only time you really truly fail in life is when you quit. But you truly can fail in the home if you're not present, if you're not making sure your family is the first priority, because there's no meaning, there's no value, you're unfulfilled. There's no purpose in having lots of money if you're not happy. The quickest way that I know to be happy is to have loving, valuable, fulfilling relationships at home that are meaningful, that help you feel like you're valued. And when that happens, and then you're thriving in the business, you're more valuable to the people you serve in the business.
That's really good stuff. I appreciate that, Cory. So maybe turning the focus a little bit here, what would you say is the most important like personality strength somebody needs to have to do what you do?
To do what I do, I just want families to be strong. So I think the biggest character would just be willing to be humble. A lot of times as an entrepreneur, I got it. I can solve this problem. Me. And we're unwilling to let the Lord in. We're unwilling to let our spouse or children in. We're unwilling to let things in. So be humble, knowing that you're not intended to do things alone, that people, God, your spouse, other people have great insight. I heard Myron Golden once say that the people that I disagree with are not wrong on everything, and the people that I agree with are not right on everything. And so there's valuable resources from lots of different sources. And so to do what I do, be humble and communicate in a way that you just want to serve. Like for me, in my marriage, I've been married almost 14 years and have
Congratulations.
five children. My marriage is successful is because I'm very intentional and very service oriented. I want to make sure the needs of my wife, my kids are taken care of. And so intentional and communicate at a very high level and be willing to say I'm sorry and apologize or listen to other people's input. I think if an entrepreneur or any couple could get the hang of that, communicate effectively, serve each other selflessly, be intentional, and be willing to be humble enough to say, I'm sorry, or that you made a mistake. If you can possess those qualities, those are tremendous foundation to build off of and then bring God into it. You're going to be pretty much in a solid place that you can have a relationship like mine that is thriving. You can have a relationship that you feel super fulfilled in, but also you can be in a position to have impact with those around you.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge you're facing right now uh, in your role as a coach with families?
My biggest challenge right now is to do exactly what I teach entrepreneurs to do. And what I mean by that is I've got 5 kids, so I that were adopted through foster care that were drug exposed and stuff like that. So I have a lot of therapy sessions each week with speech and counseling and other things like that. My kids are young; they're 3, 5, 5, 6, and 9. So a lot of attention needed for the schoolwork. My wife's in grad school, still active at church. All these things, my plate is so full that if I'm not careful, the business could really take over. And it did at the very beginning, which is why we're very good at what we do, is because we had that experience. We were taking calls late into the evening. We were allowing the business to take away from intentional time with our kids. So that would be my biggest challenge still, is to make sure that I'm very intentional, because the day goes by so quickly. And if I just take one more call, one more this, one more that in the business, my kids are going to sleep and I haven't seen them the whole day. So my biggest challenge is to stay true to my hard cutoff at 5 o'clock. My business time is over no matter what at 5 o'clock, because that is my time for my kids to finish up homework, to do family activities, to have dinner, to study the scriptures, all those things. Like, I will not work after 5 o'clock unless the kids are in bed. And it's very, very easy. Oh, let me get on one more podcast. Let me get on this. Let me say yes to so many things that balance, I could easily cross that line. And if I do it once, I'll do it more than once. And before I know it, I can lose that thing. So for me, I have such a heart of service. I want to help everyone. I want to say yes to everything. But I've learned that I only say yes if it doesn't take me away from my family, and that after my family's needs are met, then I can serve and better your life. That's when I say yes. If it's anything outside of that, I'll say no, even if it could be beneficial for that. So that's my biggest challenge, is just staying true to the things that I teach, because it's so easy to let the world take over, to be always locked up in the business, that I'm not intentional at home. And so my greatest fear is that my children would be on the playground at school, say, oh, my dad's a no-show. He works too much. That's the last thing I would want my children to say. That's the last way that I would want my children to feel about their relationship, our bond, our connection. So that's a challenge for me that I've been very good at solving the last year or so. But before that, it was even more of a challenge. And I think that's going to be a challenge for nearly every entrepreneur, is make sure that you don't let the business take over, that your family's not getting the leftovers.
Right. That's really good stuff, Cory. So, who has been your most important mentor through this process?
I was actually reflecting on this a lot the other day. And so I've had lots of mentors that have really been had a powerful impact. And I was having this conversation with my wife the other day. Like, I went to physical therapy school, which took me 4 years and a doctorate degree and lots of student debt. And I don't use it at all because now I'm an entrepreneur. So it's easy to think, well, why couldn't I have just skipped physical therapy? But physical therapy has been a huge blessing in my life because physical therapy brought me from Utah to Nevada, which is where my family was created through adoption and foster care. That connected me to a student that went to the same program as me, a class younger than me, connected me with that physical therapy conference that we went to in October. So my first most impactful mentor was Greg Todd. And then I met students in his program, Alex Engar. And I just, from one connection to the next, Catherine Jones, Myron Golden, Russell Brunson, there's been so many people that I've been able to get into their coaching program, that I've been able to become a better version of myself because of those connections. So I didn't answer your question very well because you said, who's been my most impactful mentor? But it's been a step. I met this person, Greg Todd, and then through his program, I met Alex. And through Alex, I met several others. And it's just been a progression. The Lord has blessed me with this mentor, and they helped me become more so I could be ready for this next mentor. So my my current coach right now is Myron Golden, and he's an incredible businessman. He's a man of God that teaches his business principles. Everything is Bible based, and it's been incredible to have Christian mentors in my life that share the same beliefs as me and know that my business has started because impressions from God, because of prayers that I've had, and they're willing to coach me in those things. There are some coaches that aren't based on God or Christ or that divine intervention that would think that I'm crazy, that my content is created through prayer, or that I really spend so much time praying for the couples that I work with. I love to pray with the couples that I coach on the beginning or end of our call because it's not my work that I'm doing, it's God's work. Families are such an important part of it. Families are under attack at such a high rate. Satan is working so hard on disrupting families, which is why the divorce rate is so high, why there's lots of children that are being born to single parents, especially I've seen a lot through foster care that either a mother or father is not present at all. These children that of the 5 children I've adopted, not one of them has known their father. And just there's so much broken families out there. There's so many children that are being raised in circumstances that are very, very challenging. And so family is under attack. And I'm doing my very best to build stronger families because ultimately everything that I do is to help children have the best opportunity to be raised in a 2-parent household that is a loving environment where they can have the confidence to thrive. Because my children, the experiences that they've had and the other experiences over the last 10 years of either friends who are fostering or just interactions with children who are in the system, they have a lot more to overcome than their peers in the classroom. They have a lot more to overcome. Like, what 3-year-old, what 5-year-old is supposed to be, what 10-year-old is supposed to be caring for their siblings. I've known several occasions where there's been a lot of neglect that 6 and 7-year-olds are caring for their 2 and 3-year-old siblings, infants, and there's no 5-year-old that should be having to try to cook for themselves because that's how they had to eat and things like that. And so that has been my biggest mentor, the Lord, and all these other people that have been a progression.
That's good stuff. What would you say is one thing about what you do that maybe I don't know if there's many other entrepreneurial marriage coaches specifically out there, but maybe in the broader field, what's one thing that you believe that maybe others don't agree with you about at all? It's kind of unique to you.
Well, that is a good question. I don't know so much that it's unique to me, but there is a huge myth in the entrepreneur space that if I just work more in the business, my family will be blessed.
Hmm.
And that's not true at all. Working more in the business it's not a correlation to your family being blessed. Working smarter in the business or working more effectively in the business, yes, your family can be blessed if you're intentional, if you don't let that more work, that more focus, that more dedication to the business take you away from the connection of your family. And so I guess probably a good answer is that God first, family second, and the business and everything else after that. Many entrepreneurs build their business at the expense of their family, and that doesn't serve anyone.
So true. So true. We talk a lot about productivity here on the Journey podcast. It seems like a lot of the guests that we interview are trying to find, maybe lack of a better term, but hacks to just get more things done so that they can have the right things in life, like spend time with their family. What would you say is, if you want to call it this, your biggest productivity hack? What do you do to be more productive?
Put your family on the calendar first.
Okay.
That's how I can be more productive, because when my family's on the calendar first, it allows me to wear one hat at a time. What I mean by a hat, we all have different roles in life: husband, father, son, daughter, mother, wife, entrepreneur, teacher. And in the home, especially with children, now we have to wear the role of chef, landscaper, homemaker, all these different roles. We have all these different things that we have to do. Think about this, that if I walk out into a windstorm and I got a stack of hats that are so tall and I'm not holding on, they're not secured, which is the way that oftentimes people do it with all these different roles, all these different things that they have committed to. If I walk out in a windstorm, first step I take out of my house, a big gust will knock all those hats off, and I'll have to go chase them in every which direction through the parking lot. And if I'm chasing something this direction and chasing something that direction, I'm never going to get where I want. I'm never going to collect everything that I need. I'm not going to get all those hats back in order. But when I put my family on the calendar first, now I can wear one hat at a time. Because if my family's on the calendar first, that might mean I only have a 1 hour window or a 2 hour window. And so now it forces me to become more efficient, because the work has to get done, and nor something that might take me 2 or 3 hours of distracted time can be done in an hour or 30 minutes if it's focused at 100% focus. And so putting your family on the calendar first allows you to wear one hat at a time. When it's business time, go all in the business. When it's family time, put the phone down, put business down, which is very, very hard for entrepreneurs to do because they can't turn it off. It's very hard to turn it off, your entrepreneur brain. But if you wear one hat at a time, when it's business time, go all in the business. When it's family time, go all in the business. When it's personal care time, go all in on taking care of yourself. And the more we can focus on one thing at a time, the better our outcome, the more efficient, the better quality our work will be. And Myron Golden told me this, and I'll never forget it. He's like, if you have 5 projects that take you a week to complete and you work on all of them at once, it's going to take you 5 weeks before you start paid for a project. But if I do one project, I can start getting paid for it now, and then I can go to the next project and then the next project. So instead of getting paid for 5 projects after 6 weeks, I can get paid for project 1, in the second week, in the third week, in the fourth week, in the fifth week. I get paid for project 2, week 3, 4, 5. And so I can make significantly more income when I focus on one thing at a time. When we do lots of things at a time, we don't do anything well. So do one thing well by wearing one hat at a time. The way you can wear one hat at a time is when you plan out your calendar, put your family on the calendar first, so you know how to meet the needs of your family, and you can schedule the needs of the business. Then you can schedule the needs of the community service or whatever it is. But start with one thing, do that well, move on to the next thing.
That's good stuff, Cory. A lot to take and put the heart. Okay, so and this is our Valentine's edition of the Journey podcast. And Cory, you volunteered to share some tips for to help us connect better to our spouses. So how can we do that this Valentine's season?
Yeah, it's very, very simple. Especially men, if you want to increase in your intimacy, the quickest way to do that is make sure you connect with your spouse on an even deeper emotional level. I challenge every single man that listens to this, have a conversation with their wife. When are they willing to let their guard down and be intimate is when they truly feel connected. If they feel like their needs are not being met, if they feel like they're not valued, they don't want to be touched, whether that's a hug, that's an I love you, or physical intimacy. And there's a myth. Intimacy in a marriage is more than just physical. It's an emotional connection that they need to feel like they're loved and they're appreciated. So start to serve your spouse at a higher level. Start to do things that ensures that their needs are being met. And as your spouse, especially a wife, feels more connected to her husband, the level of intimacy will increase significantly. The quality will be better, the frequency will be better. And whatever that looks like for you, you'll have to decide that with you and your significant other. But I can promise you, men, if you are not treating your wife well, if you are not connecting to her, if you're not letting her express her emotions, if you're not letting her share her things that are overwhelming about caring for young children or be a stay-at-home mom, you might get turned down, or she might go to bed, she might be worn out and tired. And so my quickest recommendation, if you want to increase your level of intimacy, is make sure you evaluate your emotional connection. And one way that you can increase that emotional connection, especially if you're working a lot in the business, is what I call the struggle bus. A lot of times people call it, you might hear them say, oh, I ride the struggle bus. And it's a negative thing, indicating that they're going through something, or it's a challenge, or they're struggling in some way. But the struggle bus for me is very positive, because the way that you get on the struggle bus is you have a conversation. Ask your spouse, what is hard for you? What are you struggling with? Do it I recommend do it daily, but do it a couple times a week. So ask your spouse, what is hard for you? And that will take a conversation. Like, think about this, men. If your wife has asked you when you come home from work, how was your day? And your response was, it was okay. It was long. It was tired. And you give a 1 or 2 word response, that's a 10-second conversation. The reason most of the time your wife asks you that question, she wants to connect. She wants to know how your day was. She wants to be able to relate and support you. But if you don't give her the information that she is seeking for, it's almost going to be like you're pushing her off, like her needs don't matter. So if you ask this question, what is hard for you? And really talk about 2 or 3 things that they struggled with that day, something that was hard, something that was uncomfortable, something that they weren't able to complete. And they say, oh, I was overwhelmed with the dishes. The kids spit up. That was hard for me. Well, the kids are sick, whatever. Now I can listen to what my wife says about the dishes. Maybe I can do the dishes that night. Maybe I can make a better schedule to do the laundry. So whatever her challenges are, if I make an effort to reduce that burden, think of something I can do, to take that struggle away, she's going to feel so valued. She's going to feel like she means the world to you. And when she means the world to you in her mind, she's willing to feel safe because you've heard her emotions, you've let her talk. She'll be willing to connect with you on an intimate level that will increase everything in the relationship. So get on the struggle bus with talking about the struggles. Get off the struggle bus by talking about things that you're grateful for, whether it's things that you saw the hand of the Lord, things that you were blessed with throughout the day, a win that you had, something that you admire about your spouse, whatever it is. Talk about the struggles, share things of gratitude, because I know for me that if I'm struggling, thinking about myself, or I'm down, I'm discouraged, imposter syndrome's kicking in, if I think about myself, I'll stay there. But as soon as I start to be grateful and serve others, I come out of that. I can be more effective. So ride the struggle bus to increase your intimacy.
Wow.
Talk about the struggles, build that emotional connection, and watch what happens.
Ride the struggle bus and be grateful. I appreciate that, Cory. And I appreciate you being on the Journey podcast. I got a couple of rapid fire questions here at the end for us. It's been great spending some time with you. What are 3 books you'd recommend to the audience and why?
From the Trash Man to Cash Man from Myron Golden.
Huh?
It talks about how he was started out as an entrepreneur. He started out driving a trash truck for $6.25 an hour, and now he's helping entrepreneurs have 6 and 7 figure days. And so it talks about how you can start to build a legacy. You can start to build wealth regardless of where you start. And we may not physically drive a trash truck, but we all have our bottom level of something. We all start somewhere. We all have the potential to become more, to do more, and to become more. So I would highly recommend that. John Gottman has several books that talk about relationships, love languages. If you just type in John Gottman, you'll see several books that come up from him. Russell Brunson's Secret Trilogy, Expert Secrets, .com Secrets, Traffic Secrets. Those are all incredible. The biggest thing is just get a topic or a need that you want to improve in, get a resource there, and implement it.
Leaders or readers is what we believe here. All right, Cory. So I'm starting a business today. What is one word of wisdom you would give me?
Get your family involved. And what I mean by that is, in a one entrepreneur home, you may have a spouse that doesn't know a thing about the business. They might have fear or anxiety, not knowing when the next check will come, or not knowing when daddy will be home, all these different things. But if you make it our business instead of my business, I think that you really make sure that the family is the first priority, because as soon as the business is the first priority, you lose. When things are not going well at home, it's very challenging for them to go well in the business. So my recommendation is get your family involved. Make sure they're on the calendar first, that they get your best efforts and not the leftovers.
That's awesome. Cory, I've asked you a lot of questions today. What's one question you wish I would have asked you?
What is one question you wish you would have? Maybe, how do you personally make God a part of your marriage business?
How do we do that, Cory?
Spend time in the Word through prayer. Spend time trying to learn who the Savior is and what qualities he possesses and how you can implement that, because God is a God of love. God is a God of service. He knows us. There's a scripture in John chapter 15 that talks about Christ being our friend. I think it probably verses like 9 or 10 through 16 or 17, something like that. That one of the scriptures that really helps me bring Christ into my relationship is that a man lay down his life for his friends. You might have heard this before that, oh, I'll take a bullet for a friend, I'll jump in front of a train. But if that really happened, most of us would not follow through on that statement. But we have a Savior, Jesus Christ, that truly did lay down his life for us. And
Yeah.
that is how I bring God into my marriage, is that I know I'm never alone. So when I'm going through a hard time, I know that I have a friend in my Savior, Jesus Christ, that knows me personally, who died for me, that atoned for my mistakes. A lot of Christian entrepreneurs really have a good relationship with Christ, and they're really grateful for his atonement, that he laid down his life for them so they can be cleansed of mistakes. But for me, the most valuable thing about the atonement is that Christ knows me personally, because he paid for my mistakes. He's personally experienced my pains. So I am never alone. And as I know that I'm never alone, because I have a friend who knows me personally, who's perfect in my Savior, Jesus Christ, that gives me the strength to know that I'm not alone in Christ, and I don't have to be alone in my marriage. That as I turn to my wife when times are hard, and not to my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, a friend, I turn to my spouse, I turn to God. That's how I can really make sure that everything I do is about service. Everything I do is about making sure that I love my wife like the Savior would love. I serve like the Savior would love. And as I start to think about what would Jesus do, I can then replicate that for my wife, for my kids, for my own testimony. So that's what I would challenge you to do, is bring God into your marriage more frequently. Pray together as a couple. We pray every morning and every night as a couple, and that's been tremendous. For 13 years, there's been very few nights that we've missed and of praying together. And the only time we've missed a night praying together is if one of us were just so exhausted and we just crashed before we did pray. But oftentimes we'll wake up and then pray, or we'll pray in the morning. But prayer has been such an incredible blessing in my life as an individual, as a business owner, as a husband, as a father. Hearing my wife and children pray for me, especially when I was struggling through physical therapy school. I nearly failed out of physical therapy school because I had severe sleep apnea that I didn't know about, that was impacting my ability to retain the information I was studying. So physical therapy school for me was a journey that I saw God's hand in my life, but it was miserable. It was really, really rough. And to hear my children and my wife pray for me that I can do good on my test. My children pray that, but standing on this big test, I have a licensure exam that I have to take as a physical therapy. To hear my wife pray that I can perform well on my test, that I can have the strength to accomplish whatever my task is. If you've never had that opportunity to hear your spouse or your children pray for you specifically for the things that are hard for you, that's pretty incredible. But what's even better is the opportunity to pray specifically for the needs of your spouse. If you're willing to do that, you can conquer anything that's hard, because that bond that you have with your significant other and with the Lord will be so intense that you'll be unstoppable. It's impossible for something to break you up, because you have such a solid foundation. So prayer every day with my kids, with my wife, is the biggest way that I can bring God into my marriage.
Well, those are really good words, Cory. I can't say anything more. I appreciate you being on the Journey podcast today. Tell the listeners where they can find you online, how they can connect with you and learn more about are strong?
Oh, our family strong is the letter R and then family strong. And the way we did our business like that is because our last name is Rankin. So the R is for Rankin. But if you say that out loud, our family strong, you're taking possession of your own family, making your own family strong. And so we have several books on Amazon. If you just type in Cory Rankin, you can find my son's children book about emotions and feelings. You can find a journal that parents and children can write back and forth to each other. You can find a communication journal for you and your significant other. You can find a book that gives you some quick business tips for your marriage. Or we have a podcast called Strong Business, Stronger Marriage, which is for married entrepreneurs. You can check that out. Or probably the best place is Facebook. I spend a lot of my time on Facebook. We have a Facebook group for married entrepreneurs that's called Strong Business, Stronger Marriage. Come check that group out, and we give a lot of feedback. We give a lot of content about how you can really thrive in your marriage. And then as you thrive in your marriage, you thrive in the business.
That's fantastic. Check out Our Family Strong online. Check out their Facebook group, and there's amazing books that they have on Amazon. Thanks, Cory, for being with us today on the Journey Podcast. It really was a pleasure, and this has been a good time. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me, Nate.
All right.